the internet, I'm primarily known for two things: making labyrinth prop replicas and drawing illustrations of a hypothetical Princess Bride remake starring the Muppets. For a while now I've had the thought, I should make some Princess Bride costumes for my Muppet replicas. But the motivation to actually get off my butt and make one of those costumes only came this year, when Carrie Elwes was announced as a guest for my local comic convention. Upon hearing that news, I immediately put what I was working on the back burner and started crafting a Dread Pirate Roberts costume for my Kermit. So this is what I am starting off with. I've already got the patterns roughly worked out for Kermit. Did all of that off screen because, to be quite honest, it just did not occur to me at first that perhaps this would be a project that I could film for YouTube. Not really good at content creation. Does not come naturally to me. But yeah, I thankfully realized pretty quickly that, oh, wait a minute, yeah, maybe people would want to see this journey of making a Dread Pirate Frogerts. I've got mostly everything at least roughly worked out, very roughly worked out. As you can see, 100% sewed some stuff on the wrong side. But that's okay, it's just a mock-up, doesn't need to be perfect. I just wanted to basically just have at least a foundation that hopefully would get me pretty close to something I was happy with once I started sewing in the final fabric. To make Kermit's shirt, I primarily referenced Bernadette Banner's pirate shirt video. I'm not going to go into the construction of the shirt in too much detail. If you want to know more, it's best to get that info directly from Bernadette's video. Oh, don't tell me. Man. Oh, good. I wasn't sewing at all at that point in time. Cool. Well, alright. I will note a few things I did differently. Firstly, while the original pattern uses squares and rectangles for each piece, I found I had to cut the torso piece more like a trapezoid to better tailor it to Kermit's egg-shaped body. And I also added fabric smocking to the sleeves to match Wesley's costume from the film. This was actually my first time fabric smocking, and I'm kind of in love with it. It was surprisingly easy, and it adds a lot of unique detail to an outfit. This specific type of smocking, you're essentially just doing an accordion fold of the fabric, then tacking it into place in strategic spots to form the pattern. I referenced a video from Professor Pincushion for this. Again, if you want to learn more, I recommend reviewing the original video. I spent way too long doing the smocking, by the way. I was massively indecisive about just how wide and poofy the sleeve should be, and I was also second-guessing the fabric choices in general. If you ever wonder why I take so long to make videos, it's due in part to stuff like this, where my perfectionism rears its ugly head and progress kinda stalls out for a bit. Said perfectionism meant I procrastinated adding the grommets to the shirt collar, because there was no going back if I screwed it up. Okay. Did that even do it? God damn it. Okay. Please don't look like garbage when I'm done. I don't think my heart could take that. I would probably just throw this all in the trash. And never speak of it again. And, guess what? I added too many grommets here. I should have just done 3 on each side, not 4. And, yeah, the desire to throw the shirt in the garbage rises every day. But since the convention was right around the corner, I had to just roll with what I had, and tell myself that maybe one day I'll go back and redo the shirt. Saying that, I am still pretty proud of this shirt. It's probably the best constructed one I've ever made, with every seam finished in some way, either by hand stitching or by using a serger. Compared to the shirt, Kermit's pants were way easier to put together. I added a drawstring to the waist, but I feel like elastic would have been better. His pants do have a tendency to fall off his butt. I use Velcro to close up the back seam of the pants, so I can still puppeteer Kermit even when he's dressed up. The waist sash is just a very long piece of fabric, hemmed, folded, and then tied around Kermit's waist. Super simple, and I thought the headscarf would be simple too, until I actually started working on it.
So the headscarf is proving to be a bit trickier than I originally anticipated. Headscarf like this, or at least like the ones you usually see pirates wear, are just a square folded into a triangle and then wrapped around the head and tied in the back. A couple problems I'm running into. Number one, Kermit doesn't really have a cranium, so what the heck do you wrap the headscarf around? So trying to get that figured out. Also, Kermit's eyes. I just, maybe perhaps out of politeness, I'm trying to keep the headscarf from not rubbing against the back of his eyes, but that means that there's only kind of this very small amount of space where the headscarf can sit. So yeah, Kermit, I'm sorry, but I might have to scoosh that up a little bit, and you might just have to deal with the uncomfortableness of fabric rubbing on the back of your eyes. So yeah, I'm just fussing around with fabric right now. Just taking scraps of fabric, cutting them into shapes, pinning them onto Kermit's head, and just kind of seeing what I can get, and testing how I like it from... Oops, sorry, Kermit, shove my fingers in your mouth. Yeah, just testing how it looks from different angles. Admittedly, not 100% on how this currently looks. So I might play with it a bit more off camera, but I think it's getting there. Maybe.
Here's the final version of the headscarf I came up with. First, I had to sew this highly specific shape together out of 2 fabric pieces, leaving a gap so that I could turn it inside out. Then, I cut and sewed some felt pieces together to make a skull cap. I did a few layers of those, sewing them together.
No! Man, I thought I was really nailing that. I thought, sorry, oh, it's gonna be some sweet footage of me expertly zooming around this curve. God damn, bobbin. No! Oh. God damn it. Why? Why am I so bad at this? Why? Okay.
And then I sandwiched those inside the 2 layers of fabric of the headscarf. I did a few stitches on the underside of the headscarf to keep the felt in place, and altogether that gives a much nicer form when it's wrapped around Kermit's head. To make the mask, I used some standard craft foam, glued it together, and then slathered on some flexible modeling paste to smooth out the seams, sanding between each layer of paste. To give the mask the appearance of being made out of leather, I glued some stretch vinyl over the foam mask. I specifically used this brand of Gorilla Glue spray for this part, because depending on how you apply it, it is repositionable until the glue fully sets. Definitely a necessity in this instance, because I had to work my way around the mask, stretching and adjusting things here and there to get a smooth result. And this is probably an optional step, but when I can, I like for the stuff I make to look as good on the inside as it does on the outside. So to finish the mask, I glued some thin felt onto the underside to cover up the rough edges. I also glued on some Velcro, specifically the spiky side, because the fleece that I use for my Kermit, F3 fleece, already had the texture of the soft side of Velcro. I also added a bit of Velcro to connect the mask to the headscarf, and I'll admit, I ended up also just sewing the headscarf directly to Kermit's face. I really wanted to just use Velcro at first, but the headscarf needed a little extra finessing to get it to look the way I wanted. It is all still technically removable, which is what I was primarily aiming for. The next thing I tackled were the boots, and this ended up being a great example of how I had to further refine the pattern once I was using the final fabric, because the vinyl I was using was a lot thicker than the basic cotton that I used to make the mock-up. I ended up on this version where the boot and the cuff are separate pieces that get sewn together. The boot cuff is going to include a bit of thicker corset making fabric to help stiffen it up a bit. The two halves of the boot are sewn together, turned inside out, and then to make the actual boot shape, I sew up this back seam with the ladder stitch. It doesn't look like much at first, but once you get it on Kermit's foot, it makes a bit more sense. To make the gloves, I first had to start by making Kermit a new set of arms. I follow puppet maker ECL's method of making Kermits, which means that each of my Kermit's fingers are made separately, then attached to an internal palm shape that slots into the fleece palm of the arm. On a standard Kermit, I would wrap a bit of fleece around an internal wire that would attach to the palm, but for this gloved Kermit, I opted to glue craft foam around the wires instead, because I thought the stiffer foam would give the fingers better shape than the fleece. I finished off this new hand by gluing a small arm rod pocket to the palm, the arm rod being what puppets Kermit's arms around. There'll be a corresponding hole in the fleece and glove, so I can slide the arm rods through the holes into the pocket.
Now, admittedly, I don't think felt is the best thing to make an arm rod pocket out of. I'm not going to be using this Kermit for a ton of puppeteering. For the most part, he's just going to be a display piece for me, or, something I bring around to conventions. So I think felt is going to be good enough. If not, then I've just created a problem for future me to solve. I'm really just putting all my faith into these arm rod pockets hopefully lasting just at least a good solid day at a convention. Oh God. Haha.
Making a glove at this size felt a little intimidating, so I opted to simplify it by splitting it into 3 parts: the main part of the glove, the cuff, and the thumb. Each of these were sewn separately so that they could be assembled on Kermit's hand. So the thumb went on first, then I tucked Kermit's palm into the fleece of the arm, with the thumb sticking out of a hole on the other side of the fleece. Then I slid the main part of the glove over Kermit's fingers, and then used the ladder stitch to attach the thumb and the cuff pieces to the main part of the glove.
So I'm not going to make this into like a nice finished seam, quite frankly, just because it's going to be a big pain in the butt. I did this to myself with the order in how I sewed the glove, but because this was kind of a pain to do, I don't want to do this over again. So, you know what? Ha ha ha, hee hee hee, no one's going to see. So yeah. This is just a secret between us, Internet. You and me. Nobody tell that I've got an unfinished seam down here. Nice. Yeah. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna know. It's gonna drive me nuts.
As a starting point for the belt, I did what is perhaps the obvious step of grabbing a basic belt from the thrift store. I cut it down to Kermit's size and debated leaving the belt as is at first, but ultimately the desire for more movie accuracy won out. So I used a bit of Warbler to start building out the belt buckle and the little metal thingy that goes on the end of the belt. For the unfamiliar, Warbler is a thermoplastic, so it's soft and moldable with heat, and once it cools, it returns to being a hard plastic. I used the Warbler to give me a base shape for both belt pieces, and then used epoxy sculpt clay for the finer details. As a last step, I stippled on a layer of modeling paste for a bit of added texture. While that was drying, I started working on the sword. The blade gave me a bit of trouble. Originally, I tried sandwiching some thin wood between layers of Warbler, but I just did not like how it looked. It was really lumpy and bumpy. I ended up going to the dollar store to see if they had any toy swords I could use for the blade instead, and I didn't find a sword, but I did find a giant novelty fly swatter. I cut and shaped the handle of the fly swatter off-screen with my rotary cutter and Dremel, and also off-screen, I assembled the sword handle from some wooden bits and bobs I had in my craft stash. and you can kind of see how everything slots together in the video here. For the various metal guards on the sword handle, I cut pieces of the thickest wire I had on hand. So thick that I had to cut it with a hacksaw, which was a miserable experience, but it meant that these bits were pretty dang strong. I used some thin wire to secure the position of the larger wires, and then slathered that with some 2-part epoxy glue. And once it was set, I started the process of layering on some more epoxy sculpt to fill out the shape. Oh, also, I scratched myself while cutting the wire, so you get to use that scratch as a way to track continuity of the remaining clips of this video. I didn't explain this earlier, but apoxie sculpt is a 2-part epoxy clay that, while uncured, can be sculpted and smoothed with water, and it cures to a hard, sandable finish. I did a few passes of this, slowly building up and refining the shape until I was relatively happy with it. I'll be honest, in hindsight, I kinda wish I just 3D printed the sword. It definitely would have been a lot faster and would have made for a cleaner build if I did, but at the time, I just kinda wanted the challenge of making the entire sword by scratch. To make the sword scabbard, I cut a piece of the corset making fabric from earlier and sewed a bit of stretch vinyl around it. My sewing machine sometimes did not agree with this vinyl, by the way, so I had to sandwich it between some layers of tissue paper to get it to sew properly. And then, similar to the boots, I sewed up the 2 sides of the scabbard with the ladder stitch to make a big long tube. There's some metal edging on the scabbard. To make that, I kinda did a faux vacuum forming with more Warbler and some foam blanks that I cut and shaped with my Dremel. I sandwiched the foam between 2 layers of Warbler, and after heating, trimming, shaping, and waiting for the Warbler to cool, I was able to coax the foam out of the Warbler, leaving a hollow shape. I actually realized afterwards that popping the Warbler into the freezer helped the foam come out a lot smoother. Those pieces got a bit of epoxy sculpt for details as well, as did the sword handle, which I also added some foam clay to the handle here to fill out that shape a bit. Then all these pieces got a few layers of filler primer spray, sanding between each layer, until on the final layer, I went and buffed the surface with a microfiber cloth, which gives the final layer of primer a nice shine. Following that, I gave everything a spritz of silver spray paint.
Now, ideally, I would have primed everything with a glossy black spray paint before putting on this silver spray paint. To be quite honest, I just forgot that was a thing. But thankfully, everything seems pretty nice without it. To the point I had bought some silver leaf, because I thought maybe I'll do a layer of silver leaf over top of everything. But I don't know, I'm pretty happy with just the silver spray paint, to be honest. So I might cut myself some slack here and just move on to some of the aging and final touches for the sword stuff. And I'll just put the silver leaf in my craft hoard to be used another day. Famous last words for any crafter: I'll use this someday, but such is the life.
For the belt pieces, I added a bit of aging with some acrylic paint, then brought back some of the shine with a dusting of gilder's wax. Rightly or wrongly, I opted to not add any aging to the sword because, in my head at least, Wesley probably keeps his sword in pristine condition. I just couldn't picture him letting it tarnish, so it just didn't feel right to add the aging. Once that was done, all these silver pieces were glued into their various places on the costume, and to finish off the sword handle, I also went and glued a strip of leather wrapping around the grip. At this point, you might be wondering, whatever happened to the sword blade? Well, my first plan of attack had been to finish off the sword blade with some aluminum foil tape. This is something I learned from an old Adam Savage video, to make something look like real metal using real metal. But after laboriously applying it to the sword blade, I realized the plastic was too thin. It would too easily flex and wrinkle the foil tape, which broke the illusion of this being solid metal. With the convention looming, I debated leaving it as is, but ultimately I knew I wasn't happy with it, so I ended up priming and spray painting the blade silver as well. I didn't do this originally because I thought the paint wouldn't hold up to the blade being slid in and out of the scabbard. Plus, maybe the flexing of the plastic would chip the paint off. But so far at least, it's holding up okay. Not perfect, I definitely can't recommend this solution wholeheartedly, but it's worked for my needs at least. The last thing I needed to do for Kermit's outfit was make the little thingamajig on the belt that holds up the scabbard, which I have since learned is called a scabbard frog. I had a piece of leather in my craft stash and decided to use it here because the sword ended up heavier than I originally anticipated, so I figured a stronger material like leather would hold up better to the weight. Leather workers should probably look away because I'm pretty sure best practice for something like this isn't just to use your sewing machine. Maybe one day I'll invest in some leatherworking tools, but in the meantime, I just folded this piece of leather over itself, sewing in such a way that I left gaps on the edge with the fold, and that created loops for the belt to fit through. I drew the shape first and cut it out after sewing, because then I could compensate for any wonkiness in my sewn lines. I added some grommets to another piece of leather. This is the piece that'll actually wrap around the scabbard. I joined the two pieces of leather using some rivets, and then all I needed to do was add some cord and the scabbard, and the rest of the costume was good to go. But there is one last all-important thing I needed to add. The mustache. I ended up getting a costume mustache that came with a bit of lace fabric on the back. On a human face, you would glue this on, but for Kermit, I was able to secure it to his face by stitching through the lace. And with that, my dread pirate Frogerts was complete and ready for his glamour shots.
Buttercup was raised on a small farm in the country of Florin. Our favorite pastimes were riding our horse and tormenting the farm boy that worked there. His name was Wesley, but she never called him that. Nothing gave Buttercup as much pleasure as ordering Wesley around.
Farm boy, polish my horse's saddle. I want to see my face shining in it by morning.
As you wish.
As you wish was all he ever said to her.
Farm boy, fill these with water. Please.
As you wish.
That day, she was amazed to discover that when he was saying, as you wish, what he meant was, I love you. And even more amazing was the day she realized she truly loved him back.
So those are the glamour shots, but I'm sure you've all been wondering, did I show Cary Elwes my Kermit? And the short answer is yes. Kermit and I made our way to the convention, where one of the first things we did was attend Cary Elwes' panel. Audience members weren't allowed to film or photograph anything, so you'll have to take my word for this next bit. But during the QA section of the panel, another audience member asked Cary what his thoughts were on remaking The Princess Bride with Muppets. And Cary said that he approves of a Muppet remake, and added that were it to happen, he would want Kermit to play Wesley and Piggy to play Buttercup. After the panel, I made my way to Cary's autograph booth where, once again, filming was not allowed, but I did get a selfie with the man himself, and I can report that Cary thought that Kermit looked great as Wesley, and he seemed just generally pretty amused to see him. I had booked an official photo op at the convention with Cary Elwes that I intended to bring Kermit to. However, it turned out that props were not allowed at the photo op. I won't lie, that was pretty disappointing, but obviously the comfort and safety of the guests is priority. Kermit might look innocent, but that's just what Vincent Price thought, and look what happened to him. But with a bit of Photoshop magic, I can at least simulate the photo that I was looking to get. So all in all, it was a good day, and I'm grateful to have had the experience of making my tribute to Wesley, and getting to share it with Cary Elwes. But that's about it for this one, folks. Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to Stories of Small Things on Instagram, who shared with me pictures of their Labyrinth Peach replica made using my video tutorial. I was pretty excited to see this, because they are the first person to use the Peach tutorial that I know of, and they did a great job. I love the little stand that they constructed for their Peach. I might have to steal this idea and make one for my Peach. If you use one of my tutorials to make your own prop, I'd love to see it. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, and Blue Sky, and if you make your own Princess Bride art, I'd love to see that as well. I genuinely think it's got so much potential as a movie, and I'd love to see more people making art for it. Anyways, that's going to be it from me. Thanks for tuning in.
This is not going as planned. Shit.
Oh my god. What the? Oh my god. What the hell? Is that a freaking stork? Yes, I did in fact spend about an hour making a tiny costume for my arm. All for about 20 seconds of video time. Cause that's just how I roll, baby. Hehe.